3 true Valentine's Day horror stories. This is Mr. H. You're listening to Masked Horror. The Missing Reservation. Valentine's Day was supposed to be perfect. 6 months into dating the most perfect girl I've ever known. Let's call her Katie. I would do anything for her. For Katie, I wanted to pull out all the stops. She deserved it. I'd made reservations at one of the nicest restaurants in the city. The kind of place where the lighting is dim, the wine is overpriced, celebs dined, and the desserts came with sparklers. It was supposed to be our night. We arrived right on time, weaving through a crowd of couples in suits and cocktail dresses. The air smelled like truffle oil and expensive candles. I gave the hostess my name, but she frowned at her computer screen and apologized. I don't see a reservation under that name. I felt my face flush. I called 2 weeks ago, I said. I even confirmed it yesterday. She gave me that polished, apologetic smile that only made me more irritated. I'm so sorry. We've been overbooked tonight, but if you don't mind waiting at the bar, I'll see what I can do. Katie, ever the patient one, tugged at my sleeve. It's fine. Let's grab a drink and wait. It's not a big deal. I tried to let it go, even though it gnawed at me. We found 2 seats at the bar and ordered cocktails. Katie was laughing, teasing me for being such a perfectionist. For a while, I forgot about the mix-up. Katie was stunning, and she was getting a lot of attention. She was way out of my league, but I was just happy to be with her. Even though it was early, I knew we were soulmates. After a few minutes, Katie leaned in and whispered, "I'm going to use the restroom. Be right back." She kissed my cheek and disappeared into the crowd. I sipped my drink, scrolling through my phone, half listening to the chatter around me. 5 minutes passed, then 10. By the 15-minute mark, I started to wonder if she was okay. I knew she had a fickle stomach, so I assumed it was that. I texted her, but got no response. I asked the bartender to see if someone could check the restroom for me, but when he came back, he shrugged. It's empty. My stomach twisted. I got up and checked myself. The ladies' room door was partially open. The lights inside flickered slightly. I called her name. No answer. Back at the bar, I pulled out my phone and called her. It went straight to voicemail. I texted her again. "Where are you? Everything okay?" But the message remained unread. That's when my anxiety set in. I walked out to the valet parking lot, hoping maybe she'd gone to the car for something. The valet hadn't seen her, and the car was still there, and Katie was nowhere to be seen. I tried to tell myself there was a simple explanation. Maybe she ran into someone she knew or stepped outside for air. I went back into the restaurant and asked the hostess if she'd seen Katie. She hadn't. I described her and showed her picture to a waiter and a couple of nearby diners. No one remembered seeing her. It wasn't long before panic fully set in. I called the police, explaining that my girlfriend had been missing for nearly an hour. The officer on the other end was calm but dismissive. "It's Valentine's Day, sir. Are you sure she didn't just leave? Maybe she got cold feet." "No," I snapped. "She wouldn't just leave. Not Katie." The officer promised to send someone over, but I could tell he didn't take me seriously. I was on my own. One of the restaurant's managers offered to pull the security footage. I watched anxiously as the grainy black and white images played out. There was Katie, walking toward the restroom, except she never went in. Instead, she turned down the side hallway that led to the back door. The manager fast-forwarded. A few minutes later, the camera showed her stepping outside into the alley behind the restaurant. My heart sank when I saw her light a cigarette. She told me she was trying to quit, but I guess she didn't want me to know she was still struggling. I watched as she leaned against the brick wall, exhaling into the cold night air. Then, suddenly, a Bentley Continental with dark-tinted windows pulled up. It rolled into the frame slowly. The driver's side door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall and well-built. He looked like a pro athlete. He was wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, but you couldn't make out his face from the video. He walked towards Katie, his movements deliberate but not rushed. Katie looked up and seemed to say something to him. He didn't respond. Instead, he grabbed her arm. I slammed my fist against the desk. "Stop it, go back." The manager rewound the footage. This time, I watched in helpless disbelief as the man lit a cigarette for Katie. She smiled at him, smiled, and then she climbed into the car without hesitation. The vehicle drove off, disappearing out of frame. That was the last time I saw her. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and Katie was still gone. Not a word from her, no calls, no texts, nothing to explain what I'd seen. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her stepping into that car, replaying her smile over and over in my mind. It didn't make sense. Did I hurt her? Why would she just leave like that? Was it planned? Was she trying to hurt me? At first, I tried to convince myself there had to be more to the story. Maybe she'd been coerced or blackmailed, or maybe something darker was happening behind the scenes. But as the days dragged on, I started to question everything. Did she go willingly? Did she want to leave me? Was this all some elaborate way to disappear from my life without confrontation? Every Valentine's Day since, I sit at home, staring at her photos, wondering what really happened. Did she leave because of me? Did she find someone else? Or was it something I missed? Some sign that she wasn't happy, that she wanted to escape? The not knowing eats at me, tearing me apart more than any definitive answer ever could. Whoever that man was, he's still out there. And every day, I'm haunted by the idea I wasn't enough for her. That a simple dinner reservation wasn't just the worst night of my life. It was the moment I realized I've never really known the only person I've truly ever loved. The stranger at the door. Valentine's Day wasn't something I'd been looking forward to this year. After a recent breakup, I was determined to treat it like any other Tuesday. I ordered takeout, poured a glass of wine, and queued up my favorite show. The quiet felt unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. For the first time in years, I was alone, and I was trying to convince myself that it was okay. Around 7 p.m., just as I was getting comfortable on the couch, there was a knock at the door. It startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I hadn't ordered a package. I put down my glass, my heart rate picking up a little as I walked to the door. Through the peephole, I saw a man standing there, holding a bouquet of red roses. He looked ordinary, middle-aged, wearing plain jeans and a gray jacket. But there was something unsettling about how still he stood. The way his gaze was fixed on the door. The flowers in his hands were beautiful, wrapped in red tissue paper and tied with a white bow. "Who is it?" I asked, not opening the door. "Delivery for Jane," he replied smoothly, his voice calm but somehow too rehearsed. That made me hesitate. I hadn't ordered flowers, and no one I knew would have sent them, not this year. "I think you have the wrong house," I said. "No, this is for you," he insisted, shifting slightly closer to the door. "Someone wanted you to have these." I cracked the door open just a bit, leaving the chain latch on. The flowers smelled sweet, and for a moment, I felt silly for being paranoid. "There's no card," I pointed out, keeping my hand firmly on the door. "Maybe it fell off," he said with a small smile, leaning forward just enough that I felt a surge of unease. "You should open the door all the way. These are for you." His tone had shifted slightly, less friendly, more insistent. My gut screamed at me to shut the door. So I did, slamming it and locking it tightly. My hand trembled as I peeked through the peephole again. He was still there, his smile gone. Now he just stared at the door, his eyes dark and unreadable. He didn't knock again, didn't say another word. He just stood there for what felt like an eternity, gripping the flowers like they were the last thing tethering him to reality. Finally, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. I didn't sleep much that night. Every sound in my home seemed louder, every shadow darker. By morning, I had convinced myself it was just a weird misunderstanding, maybe a prank, maybe someone's misguided attempt at being romantic. But when I opened my door to leave for work, I found a note slipped underneath. It was handwritten on plain white paper. "I'll come back when you're ready to talk." My stomach dropped. I called the police immediately, explaining what had happened. They sent an officer who took my statement, but without much to go on, there wasn't anything they could do. "It's probably just someone messing around," the officer said. "Let us know if he comes back." The reassurance didn't help. Over the next few weeks, little things started appearing on my doorstep. A single rose, a box of chocolates. Once, a small stuffed bear with a tag that read, "For Jane." Each time I called the police, but the items never led to anything. Whoever this man was, he was careful. One night, I came home late from work and found the word "hi" scrawled in chalk on my front door. My blood ran cold. I ran inside, locking the door behind me, and spent the night clutching a kitchen knife, too terrified to sleep. Again, I called the police. Then, on a rainy Thursday night, I came home to find a bouquet of red roses sitting on my doorstep. There was no note this time, but I didn't need one. I knew who they were from. I called the police again, and they promised to send someone over. As I waited, I noticed something chilling. The roses weren't fresh. They were wilted, their petals browning at the edges, like they'd been sitting somewhere for weeks. Had he been holding onto them since Valentine's Day, waiting for the right moment to leave them? When the police arrived, they searched the area but found nothing. No cameras had caught anyone near my door. No fingerprints on the flowers. Just like before, the man had vanished without a trace. The following morning, I called my landlord and asked to break my lease. I couldn't stay there any longer. I packed up and moved to a new place across town, somewhere with better security and neighbors close by. For a while, things were quiet. I started to feel like I could breathe again, but I still get nightmares and have PTSD. I don't know who he is or what he wants, but I haven't felt safe since that night. Every time I hear a knock at the door or see a shadow outside, my heart leaps into my throat. I've stopped answering the door altogether, even for people I know. I've even considered moving again, just to make sure, but even though nothing has happened since I moved initially, deep down, I feel like he will find me, no matter where I go. Blind match. I've never been a fan of Valentine's Day, but after my breakup last year, the thought of spending another one alone felt unbearable. So I caved and downloaded Tinder. That's how I met Lucas. He wasn't like the usual guys on there. His profile radiated charm, photos of him hiking, laughing with friends, even one of him holding a puppy. Our conversations were just as captivating, funny, clever, and filled with compliments that felt genuine. We texted back and forth for weeks, and by the time Valentine's Day rolled around, I thought, why not? Spending the evening with someone who made me laugh sounded better than wallowing in self-pity. We agreed to meet at a trendy restaurant downtown. When I arrived, Lucas was already waiting at a small candlelit corner table. He stood to greet me, and my stomach fluttered. He looked different from his photos, not dramatically, but older, a little rougher around the edges. His hair was thinner, his jawline not as sharp. but I told myself not to be shallow. Pictures don't always capture reality. The date started pleasantly enough. He was polite, even shy, and he complimented my dress, saying it brought out my eyes. But as the evening went on, I couldn't shake an odd feeling. Lucas didn't quite match the lively, humorous personality I'd gotten to know over text. He was quieter, harder to engage. I found myself carrying the conversation, asking questions he would answer with vague, curt responses. And then, his questions started. "Do you live alone?" he asked, swirling his wine glass. Caught off guard, I gave a non-committal answer. "I have my own place, yeah." "What about work? Late hours?" he pressed, his tone casual, but his eyes locked on mine. "Normal hours," I said with a nervous laugh, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. "What about you?" He shrugged. "Work from home mostly, lots of flexibility." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "What's your address? Maybe I'll send you flowers sometime." I felt like my chest tightened. His voice was calm, almost playful, but something about the way he asked made my skin crawl. I laughed nervously, brushing it off with a joke about how flowers would be wasted on me since I had no vases. By the time dessert rolled around, I decided to cut the night short. "I have work early tomorrow," I lied, reaching for my purse. Lucas's expression shifted. He leaned closer, grabbing my hand. "You're not going to ghost me like the others, right?" His smile was tight, his grip just a little too firm. I forced a laugh, pulling my hand back. "Of course not. I'll text you later." I hurried out of the restaurant, relief washing over me the moment I stepped outside. I didn't look back. My instincts told me something was off, and I wasn't going to ignore them. As I walked to my car, I noticed headlights behind me. At first, I thought nothing of it. "It's a busy street," I told myself, but as I turned corners, the car stayed behind me, keeping the same distance. My heart began to race. I ducked into a grocery store, the fluorescent lights feeling like a sanctuary. I called a friend and asked her to come pick me up, too shaken to drive. When I got home, I opened Tinder to unmatch Lucas, but his profile was gone. It didn't say we had unmatched. It was like he never existed. Confused, I checked my messages with him. They were all gone. The next morning, I found a note taped to my apartment door. In bold, blocky handwriting, it read, "You can't block me in real life." I froze. My mind raced. How did he know where I lived? I hadn't told him anything specific. I called the police, but they were dismissive. "It's probably a prank," the officer said. "Let us know if anything else happens." That night, I barely slept. Every creak and groan of the apartment felt magnified. And then, 2 days later, I found a single red rose on the hood of my car. I said I was obsessed with The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, but I didn't find this cute at all. There was no note, just the single solitary rose. I moved in with a friend after that. I couldn't stay alone in my apartment, not with the thought of Lucas, or whoever he was really, knowing where I lived. I only went back once a week to grab clothes or pick up my mail, always looking over my shoulder, heart pounding at the slightest noise. Eventually, I broke my lease and moved to a new place across town. I made sure no one was following me, constantly circling the block before parking. For months, I lived in fear, expecting to find another note or rose, but nothing happened. Lucas, or whatever his name was, seemed to have disappeared. It's been a year now. I'm in a new apartment, in a new neighborhood, and for the most part, life feels normal again. But I'm not the same. I still flinch at unexpected knocks on the door. I check my locks multiple times a night. And dating, that's out of the question. Every time I think about re-downloading Tinder, I see his face in my mind. That tight, unsettling smile. The way he said, "You can't block me in real life." Even now, I wonder if he's still out there, waiting, watching.